Okay, it's time to play some fighting games and answer some questions. And if you're wondering which side I'm on, it's the side with Android 21 and Broly. Roshi is too fucking hard. We had to stop playing Roshi. He's too much for me, I'm too bad. First up, I've been matched up with Genji a lot as Tracer. What's the best way to play with a Genji on diff kinds of maps? If we both flank, it seems like there isn't enough pressure on the front line and it crumbles. So, I mean, this is one of those things where you're not really too concerned about the front line, to be honest. Like, the idea is that you're dragging people away from the front line because you're exerting enough pressure on the back line. The thing with two flankers is that if both of the flankers aren't really good, it does end up being pretty disappointing, because flankers don't exactly do a consistent stream of DPS. They're very burst-focused, so if they're not really good at finding these opportunities and, like, getting in there and actually dragging people away from the front line, it all falls apart pretty quickly, usually. So, I mean, you're pretty much doing the same thing you would normally do as Tracer, to be honest. The only like, additional consideration I would really say to make is that if you see the Genji is going on somebody, you should try and go on the same person Genji is going on if you can. This is generally true of flankers and divers. If you can see, if you're a flanker or a diver, and you see a flanker or the other flanker or diver going for someone, you want to go for the same guy together. It just makes it way easier to kill the guy when, like, 2 or 3 of you are trying to gank this one guy. Like an Ana trying to survive a Genji and a Tracer is very upset about that series of events. Other than that, like, you're really just still trying to do the same thing you normally would. Because, I mean, there's not really any kind of, like, special tactic you're going to employ, really. Unless maybe you know the Genji and, like, you're specifically trying to coordinate things where, like, you're like, I'm gonna go on this guy and, like, try and push him over to you while you wait over there, you know, something like that, maybe. If you just matched up with a random Genji, honestly, like, just try and go for the same guy he's going for. And that's, like, kind of all I've really got for you, to be honest. You know? It's more just, like, an issue of, like, you need to be, like, really pressuring the back line so that the front line gets dragged away. And this is the thing with flankers, is they're generally good at doing this. They're very good at justifying an uneven response, right? Like, Tracer in the back line is typically going to take, like, 2 people to resolve that issue, whereas it's only taking Tracer to cause the issue. So, the benefit is, if you got 2 flankers back there, theoretically it requires, like, 3 or 4 people to effectively deal with, and therefore you've dragged a bunch of people away from the front line, so your team should be able to capitalize on that. The trick is that the flankers need to be able to create this opportunity and not just die, and then the front line needs to also take advantage of the opportunity that you have created, of which there is no guarantee that either of these things will occur. So that's, like, more the issue. People are just generally quite bad at playing with flankers because, at least, like, low ranks anyway, people need, like, really glaringly obvious signals to do something, and, like, a flanker dragging, like, 3 people away from the front line is not as glaring of an opportunity as just, like, Widowmaker killing 3 people in front of their face, you know? Them reacting to you dragging people away is, like, requires a little bit more intuition from the tanks, which, not necessarily great. More on that matter later. But, yeah, I don't really have anything more specific for you than that on that one, to be honest with you. Yeah, sorry. So, next. Card and hyperfixation is Black Clover, and my questions for this week are... So this is some weeb shit, by the way, but Black Clover is a very good anime. I highly recommend the anime, especially if you like magic and mage shit. It's basically entirely revolves around that. What sort of magic would you use? What style would you end up using it in? What squad would you like to end up in? And what squad would you actually end up in? The last one's very easy, because it both would be Black Bull and Black Bull. Like, I would say I would like to be on Crimson Lion, but that's just because Merleona is very cool. But realistically, both counts Black Bull. I feel like I'd get on well with most of the people in Black Bull, basically. Also, it just generally sort of suits me more to be on, like, the team that kind of underperforms at the start. You know, that's okay. We can fuck up a lot. We can destroy a lot of shit. We'll figure it out in the end. It's okay. It'll work out. As for the magic, if we're talking just like a basic element, probably like, I'm always really drawn to like lightning as an element, but more realistically I'd use like rock. Because there's two sides to this, right? Which is that it's just generally quite versatile. You can do a lot of shit with rocks. But my favorite weapon is also polearms, and I find polearms have good synergy with any kind of rock magic, because you bat the fucking magic rocks at them, you know? This is actually why I was really interested in playing Dota for a while, is there's a character in there who's like definitely very hard to play, but they've got a quarterstaff and they create rocks and they bash the rocks around with the quarterstaffs and like their stone copies and shit. Rocks would be like pretty tight. Just because I also like polearms, so I could double dip and do both at the same time, and that would be pretty sick. And you can just do a lot of shit with rocks, you know? You can throw the rocks, you can use the rocks as a shield, you can create, like, stone copies of yourself. You can do all sorts of shit with rocks. Very versatile element. But, like, the thing is, I'm also always really drawn to these niche styles of fighting. Like, I really like Zora's, barriers and magic circles. So, at the same time, I'm also like, you know what would be pretty sick? Is to, like, do some combination of, like, Zora's, trap stuff and spatial magic. Like, all the portals and shit. Just be, like, really funky, basically. I feel like that would be cool. But, more realistically, I'd just be, like, a rock martial artist, basically. I like polearms. And, you know, might as well bat some fucking rocks at them while we're doing it. So yeah. Either traps and spatial magic or rocks and a quarterstaff. What's your magic? Stick. Stick and rock. And then squad, Black Bull. Easy. Next up, as a healer, how do you deal with a flanking Roadhog? This is specifically on the enemy team. I did ask for clarification. So the thing with Roadhog, as far as flanking at least goes, is conveniently he can't really do particularly funky flanks, right? Like, he's a very slow boy, so he can't really get into any super unusual positions without it being pretty telegraphed, because you either saw him going that way or he's been missing for a while. Which is generally something you should be concerned about when you've noticed that one of the enemy tanks has been missing for a while now. That generally means they're up to something. So they can't really do anything. He can't do something, like, really fucky. Like, you're not going to be, like, hanging out somewhere and he's going to appear on the high ground behind you suddenly. So it's usually Roadhog's doing something like coming through a different doorway. So, like, the first example I thought of was Havana, the third checkpoint. After the bridge, obviously you're going to start fighting in the doorway at that point, going into the fortress. But then there's also, like, the cracked wall on the left side that you can go through. Roadhog players love to go through that cracked wall and try to hook you through the doorways. Or like Numbani, you know, your first checkpoint, the team's just going up the main path, and then Roadhog's going up through, like, the lobby with the big health kit, or he'll go, like, all the way around the other side and come out, like, near the, cliff around the back. In either case, like, basically the Roadhog is just coming at you from an off angle, because Roadhog isn't really a mobile enough hero to get into really unusual positions. So you can just kind of, like, boil it down to, like, he'll come at you from an off angle. What's, like, another example? Like, King's Row. The team's just pushing up through the streets, but the Roadhog's coming at you from, like, the alleyways, or the, So, like, he'll go around, like, maybe the left-hand side, near, big loop towards the end of the second checkpoint. Or he'll go, like, the right-hand side early on and try and, like, hook you from, like, the pub's alleyway, you know. Just from, like, an off angle, usually. If on King's Row, he might go all the way behind you, but again, like, he'll be missing for a while in that circumstance, or you'll see him sneaking around the alleys. Cause to be concerned. So, really, you just try and, like, position yourself away from that area, because, I mean, Roadhog's gonna go for you if you can. So if you're on, like, Havana, you just position more to the left side of the fortress than the right side of the fortress, so it's harder for him to hook you. Numbani, you just either try and stay, like, up on the high ground, you can see him coming out either of the doorways, or you, like, position, again, just further down the street, away from those corners, pretty much, because if you're a healer, you don't necessarily need to see the enemy team, you only really need to see your team, so you can stand further back if you're really concerned about the, Roadhog getting you, and that's pretty much fine. King's Row is harder, because there aren't really, like, many extra places for you to stand. You pretty much just have to stand further back down the street. Because you don't really, like, you're pretty cramped in on King's Row, you know, you pretty much just stand a little bit further back. So, you know, you pretty much, if you think the Roadhog's going to be going off flanking on you, you just think, like, alright, what's the most likely angle he's going to approach? I mean, you just try to avoid that position as much as you can. Because you just try and, like, move away from the danger, you know, it's generally how it is. Easier if you're playing someone like, Ana or Mercy, because you can just, like, stand where you can only see your team, really, and that's fine, because you can heal them. You miss out a little bit on Ana, because you can't, like, do some damage if you get the opportunity. But survival is the more important thing, you know, whereas someone like Lucio, he doesn't really get a choice in the matter. He pretty much has to be up with his team, so you don't get this option so much. But most healers, you can, like, adjust according to this based on the angle you think he's going to come from. Because there's usually only a couple of choices. Again, like, Roadhog can't get to very many unusual locations, so you just, like, this is where the main fight's going to be. Where can Roadhog realistically get to? Which is generally just a doorway that's off to the side, and he'll go around there. Can I think of another example offhand? Like, I guess, like, Dorado, he might go, like, first checkpoint. He might go, like, all the way around the left-hand side on the first checkpoint and try to hook you from the staircase. Again, you would normally be stood towards the staircase, generally, on that map. So you just stand, like, more to the left-hand side, like, maybe behind the fountain instead, and then you are less vulnerable to him coming up from the staircase. That's another one. Route 66, there's a bunch of extra doorways he can come from all over on that map, pretty much. Like, all checkpoints except for the third one. Route 66 is going to be the really scary one, because there's a lot of options. Obvious first point is that you got to worry about the mine, because that's an easy off angle for him to go for. He just goes through the mine at the start and tries to get you from the entrance. So you just try and stand away from there. You know, you try and stay, like, up on the gas station, or you try and position yourself so that you can see the mine entrance, so that, like, if he does come out and try to hook, you see him, so you can react to it and, like, try and get away. You can just stand further back, again, you know, like, usually if you're still at the first point, you'd stand, like, kind of up-ish towards, if you're not just on the gas station for whatever reason, you'd usually stand, like, right next to the mine entrance. If you're really worried about him poking out of there constantly, you can stand a little bit further back so you can see in the mine entrance, so you can see him coming around the corner in there. Or you can stand, like, back around the corner again, a little bit further back, down more towards, like, the billboard, you know? Second checkpoint, there's, like, he can come out of a lot of doorways there, so, you just need to be really aware in, like, that kind of situation where there are, like, a lot of places he could realistically go. You just need to be looking behind you constantly, pretty much, so that you see when he comes out of the doorway so you can try and react to it. Because when there's, like, 4 different options he could realistically take, Yeah, you know, there's a huge variance. You could very easily guess wrong if you just assume, so you just need to be, like, looking constantly, pretty much. And that's, like, the best you can do, really. You just try and, like, avoid it. This is generally how it goes with healers. You know, you're not going to really deal with the Roadhog situation, so you're just trying to avoid the Roadhog situation as much as you can, pretty much. And that's what I got for you on that one there. So, next up, I need to adjust the window, because I can't see it. There we go. So, I'll be honest, I included this next one just because I thought it was phrased extremely weird. Can I get a sore mind from playing, brackets, too much? I feel like my aim and gameplay are getting worse the longer and more often I play. Is this a possibility? I just thought a sore mind was a really weird way to phrase getting burned out, you know? And I also really liked the from playing brackets too much. Only the two being in the brackets. It was very strange. The phrasing on this one perplexed me a little bit. And that's the main reason. I was like, sore mind. Alright. Anyway. Yeah, like, it happens, you know. Some people can play for really extended periods of time and not get burned out. Like, I am this way. I can sit and play a game for, like, 5 hours straight, and it's no big deal. Other people can only play for, like, an hour or two before they start just getting fatigued. Particularly if you're someone who, suffers from, like, ranked anxiety in general. This is going to be more of an issue for you. You're just going to naturally get fatigued playing because it's a bit of a strenuous activity for you to engage with to begin with, just mentally. So, yeah, it happens. There's nothing else to say about it. I just really thought sore mind was really fucking weird. Anyway. How viable is DPS BAP? Why do most Reinhardts and Plat go suicidal? So, the top comment on this post, it made me commit a small laugh. It was very, very good. Plat Rein here. I have charge bound to S because I'm no bitch. Really liked that. Absolutely perfect mindset for Reinhardt. Don't need the fucking S key. I'm not gonna be walking backwards, dude. Anyway, so I think this is the part where typical bad habits Reinhardt players develop start getting punished, essentially. Which is, most Reinhardt players in general don't really learn how to position until they get to very high ranks. So, like, when they first get to Plat, this is going to be the point where, like, they've learned to be aggressive, but they haven't really learned what aggression means. So they end up just being suicidal as a result. Being suicidal and aggressive there's a fine line between these two states, generally speaking. And they haven't learned to distinguish yet. I've spoken about this before as well, but there's this thing where tank players have that takes them a very long time to get out of, where they essentially need to get hard carried by their supports for quite a while. Because they don't know how to position yet. So they end up taking a huge chunk of damage, and they need the healers to, like, brute force them through this. This is also why lower rank players always basically just want you to pick 2 main healers, because they need this, like, bigger outburst of healing to survive. If you're in low SRs picking, like, Lucio's and Yada, you're likely to get shit just because they want you to pick another main healer. Like, they want you to be, like, Anna and Baptiste or something like that, or, like, Anna and Mercy, because they just see this as being a better healing comp. Just because they're bad, and they don't know how to mitigate taking damage, so they need to, like, this healing to carry them through the situation. So, Plat, you get to Plat, and they're suddenly taking way more damage because the enemy team kind of knows what they're doing now, right? So it's a lot harder for a support to just, like, brute force heal a tank through a situation, which results in them doing these just, like, generic mad aggressive plays they were doing before, but now they're more likely to get punished for it because the enemy team kind of knows what they're doing, and the healers are going to have a harder time brute forcing them through it. It's, you know, it's just how it goes, pretty much. That's why. And there's not really much you can do about it. We've talked many times before about what you can do to mitigate, like, a suicidal main tank on your team, and there's very little, really. Like, basically, you can pick higher output healers and try to brute force them through it. Like Ana, Bio Grenade is a lot of healing. The healing boost is a lot of healing from the Ana. Nano boost can, like, fix a lot of mistakes because the guy goes in, does the bad thing, you nano boost him, you put the healing grenade on him, and suddenly he's taking way less damage and you're healing him way more. You might be able to just brute force him through this bad decision he's made and make it okay. If you're playing, like, tank, you can pick, like, Zarya and bubble the guy. You can pick maybe a dive tank and try to capitalize on the aggression he's doing anyway, right? Like, 'cause he's gonna draw a massive amount of aggro doing these suicidal plays. So you can pick, like, Hammond or Winston or something and jump on the back line while he is causing this big disruption on the front line, at least, and try and capitalize off it if nothing else. But, like, your options are very limited. If you're a DPS, there's practically nothing you can do. DPS don't have the kind of support that is necessary to carry a Reinhardt through his terrible decisions. So, you know, you got limited choices in those matters. There's not really a whole lot you can do about it, but that's basically why it happens. And, you know, it sucks. Life is hard sometimes. So next up, when should you solo ult? So you want to solo ult someone basically if they're just a really important target. The most obvious example for this to me is Zenyatta and Lucio, because these are the only two defensive ults in the game, Sound Barrier and Transcendence. So removing them before they can ult is huge. So it's sometimes worth solo ulting a Zenyatta just to remove Transcendence as a possibility in the fight, right? Because you might be coming into that fight with, like, Grav, Dragon Blade, and Trance might save the team from that, right? So you might dump your ult just to kill Zenyatta before he can ult, thereby making it so that your other ultimates are pretty much guaranteed to go through. Like, if I'm playing Reinhardt, and we're coming into that fight with, like, Grav, Dragon Strike, and I can ult the Lucio or the Zenyatta, I'll strongly consider it just so that their ult can't maybe save them from the combo, you know? Because there's no guarantee they win regardless from that position. Generally, when you get Dragon Strike grabbed, your outlook's not too good anyway. But I might just, like, ult them anyway, just to even remove the possibility. Because if your outlook's not great when you have the defensive ultimate, you're pretty much fucked if you don't have the defensive ultimate. There are a lot of situations in this game where if you don't have a defensive ultimate ready for this situation, if you end up in that situation, you're just fucked. There's nothing you can do because, like, your whole team fucking died, brother. It's, like, really fucking sad. So those are, like, the obvious examples. Other good examples of a solo ult are, like, to take another person's ult away from them. Which is basically what we just talked about then, but that was more specifically in regard to, like, stopping them from ulting to begin with. Whereas it is sometimes worth using your ult just to kill somebody who is ulting. So if, like, Mercy is using Valkyrie and I'm playing McCree, I'll Deadeye to kill the Mercy and Valkyrie. And anybody else is secondary. I'm using it just purely to kill the Mercy, and anything else is secondary. Similarly, you might be playing Zarya, and the enemy Genji might come in with either just Dragon Blade or Nano Blade. Nano Blade is the more obvious example. You might grab him just to stop the Nano Blade. For Dragon Blade, you know, you might want to play that one a little bit more by ear, but Nano Blade is very scary. And just grabbing the nano-bladed Genji can be worth it, especially if you're the defending team, because if you're playing like a 2CP map, and the Genji comes in with the Nano Blade, that can easily be the reason you lose the game. Just that Nano Blade by itself. So you trading Grav to stop that offense can very frequently be worth it. Even though Grav is not something you typically want to use on one person, Nano Blade is so scary that it is certainly worth considering, particularly if you're the defending team in this situation. If you're the attacking team, you get multiple opportunities, you know? But if you're the defending team, one lost fight is all it can take, particularly on a 2CP map. So it's definitely worth considering, at the very least, if you don't have some other way to mitigate it. Like, you might have Transcendence ready, in which case, you don't really need to do it, but it's a consideration to make anyway. What's another example? Moira using Coalescence is like a pretty easy... If I'm playing my Reinhardt and the Moira's using Coalescence, I'll Earth Shatter the Moira. Because it takes away her Coalescence and the Moira probably dies also. So I killed one of their healers, who is a very high priority target, and I took her ult away from her. A Coalescence is a moderately threatening ultimate, depending on the situation, so trading mine for hers and also killing the healer, probably, is worth it for me in most situations. You wouldn't always... That's not something you want to do 100% of the time, but it's one of the things that's worth considering. You know, these are the kinds of things that you would solo ult somebody for. Also, you might just solo ult their main healer to kill them. Like, their healers might be like Ana, Zenyatta. So if you're in an opportunity where you can use your ultimate to kill Ana, their only healer remains Zenyatta at that point, which is not enough healing to carry people through a fight. So he might end up having to use Transcendence suboptimally, and therefore, because Ana's dead, so he might just have to use Trance just to keep a tank alive before anybody's even used any ultimates. In which case, then they can wait for Trance to end and use their ultimates without worrying about it. Or he might not use Trance, in which case, I mean, he just doesn't have enough healing to keep up with the situation. So, you know, if their main healer's dead, pretty much all damage you do at that point is permanent. So, hey, that's a good time for you. You know, you're going to be pretty stoked if any damage you do is just guaranteed to stick. So, you know, those are the kinds of situations you would consider solo ulting someone for. Also, it might be worth it to kill the main tank, as well. Like, if the Rein is in a bad position, you might be in a position where you can use your ult just to try and kill him. In which case, you know, worth it, because if the main tank is dead, it usually is pretty easy to break through the front line at that point. So, you know, another situation where it's worth considering, at the very least. You're just looking for really high priority targets, or like to trade ults, more or less. So those are the examples I got for you. And then next up, and this is the last question for this week, is why is high ground good? And I mean, look, you don't need to take it from me, right? Let's consult Sun Tzu himself, in fact. In Sun Tzu's The Art of War, military leaders are advised to take high ground and let the enemy try to attack from a lower position. Fighting from an elevated position is said to be easier for a number of tactical reasons. Holding high ground offers an elevated vantage point with a wide field of view, enabling surveillance of the surrounding landscape, in contrast to valleys, which offer limited field of view. General Ji Ling of the Eastern Han Dynasty used this principle to his advantage by sending lookouts to positions of higher ground to scout for and provide early warnings about enemy troops. Additionally, soldiers fighting uphill are assumed to tire more quickly and will move more slowly when compared to soldiers fighting downhill, who do not have to struggle against the forces of gravity alongside natural obstacles in terrain. Furthermore, soldiers who are elevated from above their enemies can get greater range out of low-speed projectiles, whereas low-speed projectiles have shorter range when thrown uphill. However, getting the high ground is not always advantageous. In the Battle of Jiting of the Three Kingdoms period of China, Shu Han forces occupied a hilltop, which Cao Wei forces soon surrounded and isolated the Shu forces from sources of water and reinforcements. The Shu forces suffered a humiliating defeat, and the Shu northern expedition had to be aborted. So, Overwatch is obviously not real life, so not all of these principles translate one-to-one. Obviously, you don't need to worry about water in the game, you know, but these principles still carry over some. Like, you don't need to struggle against the forces of gravity, strictly speaking, because you're not going to get tired, but think about it this way. Getting to high ground is just generally more inconvenient to do. Like, if you're playing Winston, you have to use a cooldown to get to high ground quickly, right? This is the way it goes. Getting to high ground requires an investment, either in time or resources. Time is also a resource, for what it's worth. But, like, you need to burn a cooldown to get to high ground quickly. The inverse is not true, however. If you're on high ground and you need to get to low ground, you just walk off, and it's no big deal. If you need to get to high ground, you need to either invest time or you need to invest a cooldown. So, you know, you're not worrying about high ground because you're getting tired, but you do need to invest resources to getting to high ground, which is still disadvantageous for you, obviously, compared to the high ground defender. You have wider field of view is just good in general. If you're a long-range hero, it's easier to get headshots when you're on high ground, because shooting at the guy from above, you're probably hitting the guy in the head if you hit him, because, you know, the head's kind of on the top of your body. And then, you know, true, if you're on high, like, projectiles, it's going to be easier for you to hit them from the high ground than it is from the low ground. There's also this thing that's really cool if you're somebody on the high ground that has a movement ability. Where, so assume you're like Ashe or you're Baptiste. If you're on the high ground, Winston jumps up to you, that took his cooldown. You can walk off the high ground, so you're on the low ground now, but you have not used your cooldown. Winston jumps off to follow you. You use your cooldown to get back up again. Winston's cooldown is not back up again because he had to use it to get to you in the first place. So, you jumping off, you have the cooldown advantage, you get back to the high ground. By the time his cooldown is back up again, the state of the battle can be in so many different situations that it's probably not worth it for him to just immediately, like, sit at the bottom and wait to jump back up at you again, right? Like, something else is happening at the time. Baptiste, you can jump down, charge your knees, jump back up again. You know, this didn't even take a cooldown, right? You can do that repetitively as Baptiste. Ashe, yeah, Coach Gun's a cooldown. Baptiste's knees he just has, so you can do that over and over and over again at no cost to you whatsoever, because your knees aren't a cooldown, strictly speaking. So yeah, you know, high ground is just hard to get to, and it gives you a wider field of view, which is always going to be beneficial, even if you don't strictly benefit from it in terms of DPS, right? Like, you might not be a ranged DPS, but you still can see more, so it's just generally better anyway. Yeah, it's mostly the fact it's harder for them to get to you in Overwatch. Like, you have to use cooldowns to get to people on high ground, and that's not fun. You don't want to have to do that, right? Because they didn't have to spend any cooldowns. They were already there. You had to spend cooldowns to get to them, so the defender is always at the advantage in that position, pretty much. So yeah, that's why high ground is cool, in conclusion. And that's the last question for this week, so we gotta wait for this game to end now. So yeah, Roshi, my beautiful turtle boy, he's just very hard, and I'm very bad, and it brings me great sorrow to say, obviously, given I spent many moons waiting for my beautiful turtle boy to get added to the game, but it's just not feasible for me. His combos are very hard, and they scare me. And he doesn't have certain things that I need. I need because I'm bad. Like him not having super dash punishes me really badly because of a particular habit I have, which is when you smash somebody, which is when, like, you down heavy them, and it triggers that cinematic camera angle where, like, up, and then you follow after them. There's two ways you follow them, which is you just keep mashing heavy, in which case you'll follow them with the super dash. This works for Roshi. He will do the... because he does command jumps instead of super dash, so it's not homing. He has a modular jump he does instead. And, or he throws himself with the Kamehameha in a set direction. Again, if you mash heavy when you do this, he will follow the person, he will always pick the correct one. But the other way you could do it is you just push the super dash button instead. Which is what I did. The thing is, Roshi will not track them if you do that. So, this is just a habit I built up where I always use the super dash button instead of the heavy button, which is very bad now for Roshi time. And I was not adapting to that very well, because this is a muscle memory I've built up over 1,000 hours of gameplay, which is a lot to break suddenly. And he's just hard. He's just very hard. His combos are very hard. His moves are very weird. He's difficult to play, and I'm not good enough to play him well, essentially. It's getting pretty close. I think... Did I win this game? Yes. Yes, I did. I punched him right in the fucking mouth. So, there you go. So, thank you very much for watching if you did. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm more than happy to answer. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, please use your preferred method of communication to show it to me. Comment, email, smoke signals, psychic waves, whatever you prefer. I've started streaming on Twitch Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, 8 p.m. EST to 11 EST. There's a link down in the description. If you managed to make it all the way through the video and somehow still enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe for more content of middling quality in the future, and I hope you found the video helpful.